Daniel had never been the type of person who believed in strange things. He liked logic, quiet spaces, and keeping to himself. When he moved into the small townhouse near his university, he saw it as the perfect place to study in peace. The rent was low, the building was old but comfortable, and the neighborhood stayed calm after sunset. It seemed ideal in every way, but from the very first night, something about the place felt a little different, a little unusual, although he could not explain why. The townhouse had belonged to a woman who, according to the landlord, absolutely loved cats. She had adopted several strays over the years, letting them come and go as they pleased. Even though the cats were not there anymore, Daniel sometimes felt like the house still carried a quiet, soft sort of energy, like the memory of tiny paws moving around. In the beginning, he found it charming. He even laughed about it when he told his friends. Maybe her cats forgot she moved out, he joked. But the joke started to feel less funny as days passed. At night, when Daniel studied at his desk, he often felt the sensation of someone or something walking behind him. It was never loud or scary, just tiny, delicate footsteps that faded as soon as he tried to listen closely. Sometimes he heard a gentle tapping, like a small paw touching a wooden floor. He would turn around, expecting to see a little animal that had slipped inside. But the room was always empty. Old house sounds, he told himself every time. Nothing strange, just the building settling. Even though he tried to ignore it, he couldn't shake the feeling that the noises were timed oddly. They seemed to happen only when he was deeply focused on something. When he took a break, everything became silent again. He began trying to test it, tapping his pencil on the desk to see if the sound behind him would react, but nothing responded. The moment passed, quiet and harmless, and Daniel forced himself to continue with his studies. One evening, after a long day of classes, he sat at his desk, surrounded by textbooks, empty coffee cups, and crumpled notes. He felt tired, frustrated, and a little stressed. A soft rustling noise came from the corner of the room. He didn't even turn around this time. He only sighed in his mind and thought, without speaking aloud, "I really wish those noises would stop." It was a simple thought, not angry, not loud, just tired and a little fed up. He didn't expect anything to happen, but something did. Right after the thought passed through his mind, the air around him changed. Not cold or scary, just heavier, as if someone had quietly stepped into the room. Daniel blinked, sat up straight, and looked around. Everything looked the same, yet something felt different, like the house had paused for a moment to listen. He tried to laugh it off, shaking his head at his own imagination. But then, as if perfectly timed, a soft thud came from the balcony door. Daniel stood from his chair and walked over to check. There, sitting calmly outside on the little concrete balcony, was Luna, the neighbor's cat. Luna was a small, elegant cat with snowy white fur and bright, almost glowing eyes. She belonged to Mrs. Patel, the friendly woman who lived next door. Daniel had seen Luna a few times in the hallway, and she always behaved politely, like a tiny queen. She never made noise, never scratched furniture, and never pushed things around the way most cats did. She simply observed everything quietly tonight. She sat there staring at Daniel, her head slightly tilted, her eyes wide and unblinking. Daniel had seen cats look curious before, but this was different. Luna looked focused, almost aware. Daniel tapped the glass gently. "Hey there," he whispered, even though he had been told she couldn't hear very well. But instead of walking away or blinking lazily like most cats, Luna leaned closer to the window, her gaze following his movements carefully. Daniel wasn't sure why, but he suddenly remembered his earlier thought, his wish for the noises to stop. It made no sense, but the timing felt too strange to ignore. He found himself wondering, did she react to that? Immediately he shook off the idea. "Don't be silly," he muttered to himself. "Cats can't hear thoughts." He felt a little embarrassed even for thinking it. Still, when he slid open the balcony door to get some fresh air, Luna didn't run away or hide. She took one slow, graceful step forward and sat right at the doorway, continuing to stare at him with that same unreadable expression. Daniel didn't touch her. He wasn't sure if she liked being pet, but he crouched down so they were closer to eye level. For a moment, they simply looked at each other. He thought silently, in a gentle, almost playful tone, "You're a strange little cat, aren't you?" And at that precise moment, Luna blinked once slowly, deliberately, almost like a response. Daniel felt a tiny chill, not out of fear but out of surprise. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe Luna always blinked like that, but the timing was so perfect that it made Daniel pause. He took a deep breath, stood up, and stepped back inside. Luna remained at the door, her tail curled neatly around her paws. That night, after he closed the balcony door, the house became unusually quiet. No rustling, no soft footsteps, no tapping sounds. The silence was almost too perfect, like the house had taken his earlier thoughts seriously and had decided to behave. Daniel lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. He tried to reason with himself. Maybe Luna's visit distracted him. Perhaps he was imagining connections that didn't exist. Thoughts and timing could simply line up in strange ways. He told himself all the logical explanations he could think of, but none of them fully settled his mind because every time he closed his eyes, He saw Luna's bright eyes looking into his calm and focused, as if she understood something he didn't, as if she had been listening. The next morning, Daniel woke up earlier than usual. The sunlight entered the room gently, warming the wooden floor. For a moment, everything felt normal again. He made himself breakfast, prepared for class, and packed his bag. The house felt light and peaceful. But when he walked past the balcony door, he noticed small post-shaped marks on the outside, as if Luna had been sitting there again early in the morning, waiting or watching. The glass had faint foggy spots in the shape of her breath, like she had pressed her nose gently against it. Daniel stood there for a long moment, looking at the marks. He knew cats sometimes sat in spots they liked, and balconies were common places for them. There was nothing unusual about that, yet a part of him, the quiet part he usually ignored, felt curious in a new way. It felt like a soft whisper in the back of his mind saying, "Something is going on. Pay attention." He tried to distract himself throughout the day, but the feeling stayed. Every sound in the house seemed slightly sharper. Every quiet moment felt a little more deliberate. And every time he let his mind wander, he remembered that one strange instant. The moment he thought a simple wish for silence, and Luna turned toward him as if she heard it from far away. It wasn't scary. It wasn't threatening. It was simply mysterious, a gentle kind of mystery that made Daniel wonder what else he might discover if he kept paying attention. And even though he didn't realize it yet, that small moment, one tired thought on an ordinary night, was only the beginning of something much more unusual. Daniel returned home the next evening feeling a mix of curiosity and confusion. All day he had been thinking about Luna and the odd feeling that she understood him the night before. He tried to convince himself it was just his imagination. After all, he had been tired, stressed, and overwhelmed with schoolwork. Anyone could start noticing strange coincidences in that state. Still, the feeling didn't leave him. It stayed like a gentle question in the back of his mind. When he unlocked the townhouse door, everything looked normal. His books were stacked on the desk, the floor was quiet, and the air smelled faintly of the old wooden cabinets. He took a deep breath and tried to relax. But as soon as he set his bag down, a soft sound came from the balcony door, like something brushing against the glass. Daniel paused. He wasn't sure if he should check, but curiosity won. When he walked over and pulled the curtain aside, there she was again, Luna. She sat in the same spot as last night, her white fur glowing faintly in the soft evening light. Her bright eyes were calm but alert, watching him with the same quiet awareness. Daniel gently slid the door open, and Luna walked inside without hesitation, as if she had been waiting for him. He wasn't expecting her to enter so confidently. He had always heard that cats could be shy, careful, or a bit unpredictable. But Luna behaved as though she knew the place better than he did. She walked slowly across the living room, her tail raised like she owned every corner. Daniel watched her carefully. "Hey Luna," he said softly, though he knew she might not hear him clearly. "You came back again." Luna didn't meow or make any sound. Instead, she glanced over her shoulder at him with that same deep look, the kind that made Daniel feel like she was listening to more than just his voice. He crouched down a little, so she wouldn't feel overwhelmed. Luna walked up to him and sat near his feet. Daniel wasn't sure whether he should pet her, but she didn't seem bothered by his presence. Her calmness made him feel calm too. He silently thought to himself, very gently, "Please don't knock anything over." It wasn't a command, just a quiet hope. He didn't want his papers or books to get scattered. The moment he thought this, Luna paused mid-step. She didn't look startled. She simply froze, as if she had heard something subtle. Her ears angled slightly backward, not in fear but in deep attention. She then turned her head slowly toward Daniel. Her eyes narrowed in a way that wasn't angry but meaningful, a look that suggested she understood something she wasn't supposed to understand. Daniel felt a strange flutter in his chest, not fear, but surprise, mixed with wonder. He swallowed lightly. "Did you hear me?" he whispered, even though he knew cats don't respond to questions like that. But Luna didn't wander around or nudge objects like a normal cat might. Instead, she stayed still for a few seconds, observing him as if waiting for something more. The room felt unusually quiet, like the whole house was holding its breath. Daniel tried to laugh, but the sound felt nervous to him. Surely, it was just timing. Cats pause sometimes. Cats look at people. Cats blink slowly. He reminded himself of all the logical explanations he could think of, but his heart wasn't fully convinced. He walked to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Luna followed him quietly, smoothly, with steps so light he barely heard them. She didn't meow or rub against his legs. She just stayed close enough to watch. "Do you want some food?" he asked kindly, although he already knew Luna didn't usually eat here. Mrs. Patel took good care of her, but Luna simply sat in the doorway, eyes bright and unblinking. When Daniel went back to the living room, Luna jumped lightly onto the couch. She didn't scratch it or curl into a ball. She sat upright, elegant and composed, her eyes scanning the room. Daniel sat across from her on the rug. He didn't know why, but he felt like they were having some kind of silent conversation, not with words, but with attention. With awareness, he rested his elbows on his knees and thought in his mind, "You're not like other cats, are you?" Luna blinked slowly again, that same deliberate, timed blink that made him question whether it was just coincidence or something more. For a moment, Daniel felt the same heaviness in the air that he had felt last night, soft, warm, and oddly attentive. He leaned back slightly. A small part of him wondered if he was imagining everything. Another part whispered that even imagination had limits, and something about Luna's behavior felt too real. The rain began lightly outside, tapping gently against the balcony. The soft sound somehow made the room feel cozier. Luna looked toward the window as if she heard something deeper than the rain, then turned her gaze back to Daniel. He tried another quiet thought, this time a little playful. If you really understand me, do something. I don't know. Unusual. Luna tilted her head. Then without breaking eye contact lifted one paw and placed it gently on the couch cushion, pressing it down once. A tiny movement, soft and simple, but timed in a way that made Daniel's heart skip. He didn't know whether to laugh or gasp. It was such a small gesture, but it felt too perfect, too synchronized with his thought. Okay, that was weird, he whispered, unsure whether he should feel amazed or worried. But Luna didn't behave mysteriously in a dramatic way. She didn't jump suddenly or act strange. She simply lowered her paw and continued sitting there calmly, watching him with her clear eyes. It was the calmness that made everything feel real. If she had done something wild, Daniel could have easily called it coincidence or instinct, but this quiet, precise response was different. He decided not to test her further that night. Instead, he simply let her sit near him while he read through his notes. Luna didn't interrupt him or wander off. She stayed on the couch for almost an hour, silently keeping him company whenever he looked up from his book. She was there still, patient, almost thoughtful, and whenever a stray thought drifted through his mind, she seemed to react in small ways, a slight turn of her ear, a shift of her tail, a soft blink. Each tiny reaction added another piece to the puzzle forming slowly in Daniel's mind. When it was time for Luna to leave, she stood gracefully and walked toward the balcony door. Daniel opened it for her. She stepped out, turned once to look at him with one last slow blink, and then disappeared into the quiet hallway. Daniel closed the door and leaned against it for a moment. He felt warm and strangely comforted, even though he didn't fully understand what was happening. He wasn't scared. He wasn't uncomfortable. He felt curious, deeply curious. He wondered why Luna acted that way with him. Did she respond like that to everyone? Did Mrs. Patel know anything? Was he imagining everything? Or was something happening that he couldn't explain with normal logic? He turned off the lights and got ready for bed. As he lay down, he found himself smiling without meaning to. There was something peaceful about the whole experience, even if it confused him. Something gentle, mysterious, and impossible to ignore. And just before he fell asleep, he had one final thought, soft and sincere. If you come again, I'll be ready. He didn't speak it aloud, but the room felt like it heard him. Daniel did not expect anything unusual to happen the following night, but a part of him quietly hoped it would. Ever since Luna had reacted to his unspoken thoughts, his mind had been filled with questions he couldn't answer. He went through the day like normal, attending classes, taking notes, and talking with classmates, but he felt distracted the entire time. Every small moment reminded him of Luna, her slow blinks, the way she paused at the exact second he thought something, and the soft stillness she brought into the room. As evening arrived, the sky turned a dim gray, hinting at a coming storm. Students hurried across campus, trying to get home before the rain started. Daniel walked quickly, holding his notebook over his head just in case. He didn't mind rain, but tonight he felt a strange sense of anticipation, like something important was waiting for him at home. When he reached the townhouse, the sky was already rumbling softly. He unlocked the door, stepped inside, and placed his bag down. The house smelled like warm wood and old books, exactly the same as always. He changed into comfortable clothes, made himself a cup of tea, and sat at his desk to review his notes. But his focus drifted again and again. Every few minutes he would glance at the balcony door. He didn't see Luna there. Not yet, but the room felt as though it was expecting her. Like an unwritten rhythm was moving toward a familiar moment by the time the storm broke. The sky outside had darkened completely. Rain fell in steady sheets, tapping against the balcony and roof. A soft roll of thunder passed overhead, not loud but deep. The electricity flickered once, then stabilized. Daniel tried to continue studying, but his eyes kept drifting toward the window. The room seemed dimmer now, lit only by a small lamp on his desk. Shadows stretched across the walls, softened by the warm glow of the light. Around an hour later, the power suddenly went out. Everything blinked into darkness. Daniel sat still for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. He wasn't afraid of the dark, but there was something very still about the room now, like the air had thickened. He stood up slowly and walked to the balcony door. The storm outside lit the sky briefly with flashes of white-blue lightning. Each flash revealed the wet pavement, the dripping railings, and the faint outlines of trees swaying in the wind. And then, in one bright flash, he saw her. Luna was standing at the edge of the balcony, rain around her but not touching her directly, as if the drops parted slightly as they fell near her. She looked completely calm, her fur hardly disturbed by the weather. Daniel felt a soft jolt in his chest, not fear, but recognition, as if he had been waiting for her without saying it aloud. He unlocked the balcony door and opened it. Luna walked inside with slow, graceful steps that made almost no sound. She shook her head gently, flicking off a few drops of water, then sat on the floor near his feet. "You came back," Daniel whispered automatically. Luna looked up at him with bright eyes that seemed even clearer in the dark room. Outside, the rain continued pouring steadily. The storm made the world feel smaller, softer, more focused. Everything felt closer. Daniel returned to his desk, lit a small battery lantern, and placed it in the center of the room. Its warm yellow light created a soft circle around him, and Luna, the shadows on the walls danced quietly with every flicker. Luna watched him carefully, then jumped lightly onto the couch. She didn't curl up. Instead, she sat tall, her tail wrapped around her paws. She looked like a tiny guardian, silent and alert. Daniel rested his elbows on the desk and thought, "Why do you always come here on nights like this?" The moment the thought formed, Luna's ears twitched slightly. She didn't turn her head, but her attention shifted. He could feel it. She seemed to be listening to something that wasn't a sound. Another flash of lightning lit the room softly. In that brief brightness, Daniel saw Luna's eyes glimmer. When the light faded, she blinked once, slowly. Daniel took a slow breath. "Okay," he whispered. "I have to know if I'm imagining this." He closed his eyes for a moment and thought clearly, carefully. "If you hear me, make a small sound. Any sound. Just one." The room stayed quiet for a few seconds. Rain tapped gently outside. Thunder hummed in the distance, then so soft that Daniel almost wondered if he imagined it. Luna made a tiny noise. Not a meow, not a growl. It was a short, low vibration, like a soft purr that lasted only a moment. Daniel's eyes opened immediately. His heart began to beat faster, not from fear, but from a deep electric surprise. He stared at Luna, who was already staring back at him. He slowly sat down on the edge of the couch, leaving a small space between them. Luna didn't move. She simply shifted her head to face him fully. Daniel wasn't sure if he should try again. He didn't want to push too far or risk misunderstanding something, but curiosity gently pushed him forward. He shaped another thought carefully in his mind. "Why do you listen? Why me?" For a long moment, Luna didn't react. She stayed perfectly still. Outside, the thunder grew louder for a moment and then softened again, like the storm itself was breathing. Then, in the dim lantern light, something happened, something subtle yet deeply strange. Luna didn't open her mouth. Her body didn't move, but Daniel felt something like a voice not in his ears. But inside his mind, it wasn't a sentence he heard. It was a feeling shaped into words, a soft whisper that wasn't sound at all, more like a ripple of meaning. "Careful, human, I hear everything." Daniel jerked slightly, as though someone had tapped him unexpectedly. His breath caught in his throat. He looked around the room instinctively, but there was no one there, just him, the lantern, and Luna. Luna's face hadn't changed. She wasn't speaking in a dramatic way. She wasn't acting unusual. She simply watched him with calm, steady eyes, as if nothing strange had happened at all. But Daniel had felt it, clear, direct, quiet, but unmistakable. He swallowed, unsure how to react. "Was that you?" he whispered out loud, though he already knew the answer. Luna didn't move. Daniel felt a soft wave of calm wash through him. He wasn't scared, even though he knew he should be confused or startled. Instead, he felt a strange sense of trust. Luna's presence didn't feel threatening. It felt protective, watchful, and somehow ancient in a way he didn't understand. He leaned back against the couch cushions, trying to steady his thoughts. Luna stepped forward, gently, and curled herself near his side. She didn't cuddle or press against him. She simply rested close enough to touch his sleeve with the tip of her tail. The lantern flickered, and the room grew even softer. Daniel stared at the wall, still processing what had just happened. He had never believed in anything unusual before. He liked facts, science, and reasonable explanations. But this was something different, something that didn't follow ordinary rules. He looked down at Luna. Her eyes were half closed now, as though she was peaceful. But Daniel knew she was still fully aware of everything he was thinking. He shaped one last silent thought before he let himself relax. "What are you, really?" Luna's tail twitched once. She didn't respond this time. Not with words, not with a sound. She simply stayed close, calm and knowing. As the storm continued outside and the night wrapped gently around them, Daniel didn't have answers yet, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't imagining anything. Something real had happened. Something quietly extraordinary, and this was only the beginning. Daniel woke up the next morning feeling strangely rested, even though he had fallen asleep very late. The storm had passed by the time he opened his eyes. The room looked calm, the air smelled fresh, and there was a quiet brightness coming through the curtains. For a few seconds, everything felt normal. He lay still, listening to the soft hum of the refrigerator and the faint chirping of morning birds. Then he remembered what had happened. "Last night, Luna," the silent message. The words he didn't hear with his ears but felt inside his mind. "Careful, human, I hear everything." At first Daniel wondered if it had been a dream. Dreams could be strange, especially after stressful days. But when he sat up and looked around the living room, He noticed a few small hints that proved last night had been real. The lantern he used during the power outage was still sitting on the floor. A tiny patch of Luna's white fur rested on the couch cushion, and near the balcony door, there was a faint paw print on the glass, as if she had touched it gently before leaving. Daniel touched the paw print with the tip of his finger, feeling the cool glass beneath it. It was real. Everything had happened. He made breakfast while his mind replayed the moment he had felt Luna's voice. He kept asking himself questions that had no easy answers. What exactly was Luna? How could she understand thoughts? Why did she choose him of all people? Was this something that had always been happening around him, and he had only just noticed? He spent most of the morning pacing around the living room, drinking tea and trying to calm his thoughts. He didn't feel afraid, but his curiosity was growing stronger than ever. The gentle mystery surrounding Luna was something he couldn't ignore anymore. By afternoon, Daniel decided he needed to understand more. He sat at his desk with his laptop and typed simple questions into the search bar. Can animals sense thoughts? Cats and intuition. Silent communication with pets. Most of the results spoke about instinct, body language, and emotional awareness. Nothing explained what he had experienced. Nothing even came close. Out of curiosity, he typed, "Previous tenant townhouse cat's unusual behavior." It felt like a stretch, but he didn't know what else to do. He didn't find anything helpful at first. But later in the evening, when the sky grew orange with sunset, he remembered something the landlord had mentioned. The woman who had lived here before had owned many cats and believed they had spiritual awareness. Daniel had laughed about it when he first heard it, but now he wasn't so sure. He opened a few old community forum pages, searching for any posts about the previous tenant. After a few minutes, he stumbled upon a small comment from someone who had known her. It said she had believed the house had a special kind of energy that made animals gather and respond in unique ways. She had loved her cats deeply and believed they acted as protectors of the space. Daniel sat back in his chair and sighed softly. "Protectors," he murmured. The word brought a warm, steady feeling to his mind. Luna didn't feel dangerous. She felt aware, thoughtful, and strangely protective that evening. Daniel kept the balcony door slightly open, just enough for fresh air to flow inside. He wasn't expecting Luna to appear, but he found himself glancing toward the door every few minutes. Even though he didn't want to admit it, a part of him hoped she would come again. That hours passed quietly. Daniel studied, cleaned up his desk, and made a warm drink. The house felt peaceful, but he still felt the puzzle of last night sitting quietly inside him. Just when he started thinking Luna might not come tonight, he heard a soft sound. Not a meow, not footsteps, just the faintest brush of fur against the balcony door. Daniel looked up. Luna was sitting outside again. Her fur glowed in the soft streetlight. She looked peaceful but focused, as if she had come with a purpose. Daniel opened the door, and Luna walked in gracefully, as though the space belonged to her too. "Hi," Daniel whispered, unable to hide his small smile. "I wasn't sure if you'd come." Luna didn't blink slowly like she sometimes did. Instead, she looked around the room, as if checking something. Then she sat near his desk, looking up at him. Expectantly. Daniel felt the familiar quietness in the air, the same attentive stillness he always felt around her. He sat on the rug, leaving a comfortable space between them. He thought gently, "Can you really hear my thoughts? Or was last night something rare, something only once?" Luna's eyes softened. She didn't make a sound, but her tail wrapped neatly around her paws, and she tilted her head slightly. It wasn't a clear answer, but it felt like she understood the question. Daniel decided not to push too much. Instead, he spoke aloud, keeping his voice warm and gentle. "I want to understand you," he said softly, not in a strange way. "I just want to know what all this means." Luna blinked once, a slow, calm blink that made his chest unclenched. It felt like reassurance. Curiosity pushed Daniel to explore further. He went through old cardboard boxes in a small closet near the hallway. He didn't know exactly what he was looking for, but something inside him whispered that there might be clues left behind by the previous tenant. After searching through a few boxes of tools and cleaning supplies, he found a small notebook tucked behind some old light bulbs. The cover was faded, and the pages looked worn, but it belonged to the previous tenant. Her name, handwritten in neat ink, was on the first page. Daniel sat back on the floor and opened it carefully. Most of the entries were simple notes about the cats she had cared for. But then he found a page that caught his attention. It said some cats come here on their own. They act different. They seem to watch things humans cannot see. They listen in ways humans do not understand. Daniel felt a soft chill, not fear, but recognition. Another entry read, "They sense thoughts, not words. They comfort, warn, guide, and protect. Not all are ordinary." Daniel lowered the notebook slowly. His hands trembled a little, not out of worry but out of discovery. He looked at Luna, who had quietly walked closer and sat beside him. Her tail curled around his arm as if she wanted him to keep reading. He continued turning the pages. More notes spoke about how cats reacted when the tenant felt sad, lost, or overwhelmed. They approached at the right moments, sat with her in silence, and sometimes acted like they knew what she needed before she knew it herself. There was no mention of Luna specifically, but Daniel had a feeling these notes were describing something very close to what he was experiencing. He closed the notebook gently and looked at Luna. "Is that why you're here?" he whispered. "To watch over things, to listen." Luna looked at him with deep, soft eyes. She didn't answer with words this time. She didn't need to. Something about her presence made Daniel feel understood without explanation, like she knew things he didn't, and that she wasn't here to harm or confuse him, only to guide, listen, and stay close when needed. Daniel placed the notebook aside and sat quietly with Luna. The room felt safe, warm, and strangely peaceful. He could almost feel the air settle around them. For the first time since everything began, he felt less confused. Not because he had all the answers, but because he understood something important. He didn't need to be afraid. Whatever Luna was, she was on his side. As the night grew slower, Luna curled herself near Daniel and stayed there in soft silence, not demanding attention, not acting unusual, just being there, gently watching, quietly listening. And for the first time in days, Daniel felt truly calm. Daniel woke the next morning with a gentle sense of peace, the kind that stays with you before you even open your eyes. The memory of Luna sitting quietly beside him during the night felt warm and comforting. He had fallen asleep on the couch with a notebook from the previous tenant on his lap, and Luna curled neatly beside him like a small guardian. Sunlight entered the room softly, filling it with a warm glow. Daniel sat up slowly, rubbing his eyes. Luna was no longer beside him, but a few strands of her soft white fur remained on the cushion, proof that she had been there. He smiled gently. He didn't feel worried or confused anymore, just curious, calm, and strangely connected to something he didn't fully understand. He stretched, placed the notebook on the coffee table, and made himself breakfast. As he ate, he kept glancing toward the balcony door, wondering if Luna would return today or if she had already left early in the morning. Something told him she would come again, not because she needed anything, but because she chose to. The rest of the day went by slowly, but in a pleasant way. Daniel completed his assignments, cleaned up his room, and even organized his bookshelf. Everything felt lighter now, as if a quiet weight had lifted after the strange nights of questions and uncertainty. Luna had brought something with her, something calming, something meaningful. In the afternoon, he sat by the balcony and let the warm air brush against his face. He closed his eyes and thought softly, only half expecting anything to happen. "If you're around, you can come inside if you want." Nothing happened immediately. Daniel laughed softly at himself. "I'm talking to the air now," he said quietly. But then, 10 minutes later, he heard a familiar soft sound at the door. A gentle tap, like a paw touching the glass. Daniel opened his eyes. Luna sat at the balcony again, looking peaceful and patient, as if she had been there for hours, waiting for him to notice. Her bright eyes were calm, the same steady eyes that had watched him. Through nights of confusion and curiosity, he opened the door and Luna stepped in gracefully. She walked to the center of the room and sat down, her tail neatly folded around her paws. Daniel sat across from her on the floor. Something about today felt different. Not frightening, but important. Like a final piece of the puzzle was waiting to be understood. He took a slow breath and let his thoughts settle. Then he shaped a clear thought in his mind, not loud or demanding, gentle and sincere. "What are you, Luna?" Luna's ears twitched lightly. Her gaze was steady and calm. She didn't move for several seconds. Then she stood up slowly and walked closer to Daniel, stopping at an arm's length away. She sat again, curling her tail around her feet. Daniel felt a soft pressure in the air, not heavy or uncomfortable, just present, like the quiet before a meaningful moment. Then he felt it, a soft, warm presence brushing his mind. This time it wasn't words shaped from nowhere. It was a feeling that slowly formed into meaning, like a thought sent back to him with gentle care. It wasn't loud, not startling. It felt like a whisper resting inside his heart rather than his ears. Something that listens. Daniel's breath trembled slightly. Luna's eyes didn't move. She didn't open her mouth or shift her body. She simply existed in that calm stillness while the message flowed through him. A moment later, another soft feeling took shape, like a quiet answer continuing where the first one left off. Something that stays while others don't. Daniel felt his throat tighten, not out of sadness, but from the depth of the message. It felt honest, gentle, and real. He didn't understand everything, but he understood enough. Luna wasn't just a cat. She wasn't just an ordinary animal who wandered from home to home. She was something more, something aware, something protective, something connected to people in a way that went beyond simple instincts. She had chosen him, not by accident, not by chance. She came when his thoughts were loud, when his mind felt full of worry and uncertainty. She came during storms, during quiet nights, during moments when he needed someone close, even if he didn't say it out loud. Daniel felt warmth build behind his eyes. He didn't cry, but he felt a deep wave of emotion wash through him. Not sadness, something softer. Gratitude, understanding. He reached his hand out slowly, giving Luna a chance to move away if she wanted to. She didn't move. Instead, she leaned her head gently into his hand, her fur soft and warm. It was the first time she had ever done that. Daniel let out a quiet breath, relieved and touched. He stroked her head gently, feeling an unexpected closeness to her. "Thank you," he whispered softly. Luna blinked slowly, the kind of blink that spoke without words. For a long while, they stayed together on the living room floor, Daniel sitting quietly, Luna resting near him with her eyes half closed. The house felt peaceful, like it was wrapped in warm sunlight and soft silence. After a while, Luna stood up again. She didn't walk toward the balcony or the door. Instead, she walked around the room slowly, as if checking everything. Then she sat beside Daniel once more, watching him with the same calm expression. Daniel shaped another thought gently. "Will you keep coming back? Or was this the last time?" Luna didn't answer immediately. She took a few steps toward the balcony door, paused, and then turned her head slightly. Her eyes had a softness to them, like she was giving him a quiet promise. Her tail curled gently before she slipped outside to the balcony. She didn't leave right away. She stayed there, looking out at the sky for a few minutes. Daniel walked to the door but didn't open it yet. He simply watched her through the glass, feeling an unexpected sense of peace. Luna finally turned her head and looked at him through the door, her eyes warm with unspoken understanding. Then she walked away slowly, disappearing into the hallway beyond. Daniel closed the curtain gently and stood for a moment, feeling the lingering calm she had left behind. He didn't feel unsure anymore. He didn't fear the unknown. Instead, he felt grateful for everything that had happened, every small moment, every gentle message, every slow blink. Luna wasn't gone. He knew she would return when needed, not out of obligation, but because that was what she did. Something that listens, something that stays. As the evening sun dimmed and the room filled with a soft glow, Daniel sat at his desk to write down everything he had learned, not for proof, not to show anyone else, just for himself, so he would never forget how something so simple and quiet had changed the way he saw the world. And every now and then, as he wrote, he felt a light presence pass through the room, like a gentle reminder that Luna was still somewhere near, listening in the way only she could. Daniel smiled, knowing with full certainty that the story wasn't ending here. It was only becoming something deeper, something lasting, something quietly magical, because sometimes the most extraordinary things come softly, with slow steps, silent messages, and bright eyes that hear more than words. And Daniel would always remember to keep his thoughts gentle because someone was listening.